Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to class. Good to see everybody. And it is Tuesday, so we'll give a few more minutes for folks to jump in, but happy Tuesday. All right, thank you, Francesca, appreciate that. Okay, I was saying good morning. How's everybody doing today? The coffee hasn't kicked in yet, so appreciate that. So thank you, Francesca. So yeah, guys, good morning. Like I was saying, good to see everybody. Good morning, good to see you. And we're gonna basically jump in today because I kind of want to take some time to review some designs. But objectives for today, let's go ahead and go over that. We are going to be looking at understanding and applying color corrections and effects in Photoshop today. So we'll be going over the grid variation tool or grid variation exercise, which specifically focuses on effects, the effects panel, and then also the adjustments panel. So we'll be exploring that today. This is kind of like the color adjustment portion of the class. So we'll be learning about setting up multiple layers in a document, how to scale those layers, but also how to apply effects specifically to those layers. So that'll be our goal for today, is to kind of understand how to do multi-layers, but intentionally, but also apply color correction, image adjustments, and effects onto those specific layers. So that's the exercise for today that we'll be working on. We'll also take a little bit of time to review a couple of collages that are being worked on. So we'll have some time to share that this morning as well. So we'll look at that too. And then if there's any more career goals photo montages that are slowly being popped up or shared, then we'll take a few moments to look at that. I think we have one from Talia that she shared last night. So we'll go over it as a class, and we'll take a look at that and kind of break down some of the layers and things of that sort. So that's going to be our goal for today. The new stuff is the grid variation exercise. We'll kind of review a couple of collages that are being used out there with shared files, and we'll review one photo or the career goals photo montage or collage. We'll be sharing that for today. Okay. But first things first, we're going to do principles of design, and we're going to do it again. Remember, guys, this Friday is your principles of design presentation. So you were finding 10 images and you're writing the principles of design for each photo. So it's basically worth 60 plus points, 80 because you have a cover with that. So but you're basically going to be writing for that principles of design exercise, and that's going to be due this Friday. So I gave you extra time on that, but the expectation is that you're going to be writing out of the 10 images that you selected. You want to make sure that you're writing like you've been writing yesterday and into today, those long format of paragraphs, right? They're like 8 to 9 sentences roughly, and they're specifically talking about the principles of design for those images, okay? So you guys remember that exercise that we're working on that was extended? You found 10 images, you brought it into a Google slide presentation, right? And then you're writing on each one. And we did talk about that. If you remember that, give me a thumbs up emoji. If you've already turned it in, thank you for turning them in. I appreciate that. But if you forgot, look at the principles of design slide, all right? It's gonna be, I believe it's day 6, if I'm not mistaken. And look at that. And the video's there, and we go over specifically how those formats are done. But the way we're doing our warm-ups is exactly how you wanna write it for your assignment. That's why we're doing it for the first 30 minutes in the morning. And we're doing that all this week and into next week as well. So, and the reason why is because I want you to get into the habit of breaking down and deconstructing designs almost to the level that it's second nature. It's almost like very natural. So we got to keep practicing those principles in order to see, like a designer, because whatever you can deconstruct and break down, you can recreate using your own art, your own photos, your own images. I mean, you want to get to that level where you can look at something and break it down and deconstruct it. So we're going to do that right now. Okay. So you'll find this under the today's discussion post. If you want to follow along, that's great. But let's go ahead and break that down. I'll keep an eye out for the noise, making sure that it doesn't get a little bit too overwhelming out there. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in and let's begin. Okay. So we have a second student collage that is happening here, and we're going to analyze that as well. So this is also student work, and we're going to be analyzing this. Okay. So just going back to our principles of design, principal elements of design, basically, when we type this down in terms of the structure, right? Sentence 1, there are multiple in this image for the student career collage or student collage number 2. There are multiple principles of design. So we start off with first sentence, general statement. General means, hey, we're about to talk about principles of design. Okay, so that's obvious. Second sentence, you go slightly deeper and you say, oh, well, the principles of design that we are about to discuss or see in this image are the following: contrast, focal point, balance, proportion, scale, harmony, and variety. Okay, so sentence 1 and 2 are basically just saying, we're about to talk about principles of design. Sentence 2, hey, the principles of design specifically we're going to be analyzing are contrast, focal point, balance, scale, harmony, and variety. Okay. Then sentence 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are going to go specifically into each element, or excuse me, each principle, and we'll break those down very specifically for each one. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Sentence 3, let's analyze. And we can actually start with focal point, then go into contrast, because I feel like focal point is easier for readers and for viewers to talk about, because then you can say, oh, what's the focal point? What's the first thing you notice in this design? Okay. So I ask you the question. Now that we're starting to analyze, when we look at any design, the first thing you always say is, okay, what's the first thing I noticed in this design? Okay. So we're going to break that down. So what do you see? What's the first thing that you notice? Okay. I also like to put it, if a 5-year-old were to come in and look at this design, they're going to say, oh, wow, look, I see this. What would that be? Okay. What's that first thing that you notice in this particular image? Okay. Whether it's a photo or whether it's a document, what would you say that would be? And you can type it in the chat, or you can voice it out so we can see what your response is. But what would that be? What would you say is the first thing that you notice? It can get a little tricky, but just want to break it down and see what is that first noticeable thing that you notice there. Okay. And go ahead and type that in the chat right now to see what you think it might be overall. Okay. Okay. So center of the background. Okay. I think that kind of goes in line a little bit with Francesca was saying there too, neon lights of the buildings. Okay. All right. Anyone notice anything else? You could type it in the chat right now. Like what's like sort of the first thing you notice, right? We notice a lot of things, but it's always about like, what is that first thing that you sort of notice there? Okay. Okay, dark contrast of the buildings, okay, versus the rest of the images, Colosseum. Okay, so we could pretty much say that the focal point in this particular image is, and I'll use my annotations to kind of guide us there a little bit. We can definitely say that within sort of like this sort of central image here, within this range, we're starting to notice a focal point, whether it's these buildings in the center or a combination of the buildings and the Colosseum, right? We pretty much know that this area here is starting to be sort of the focal point, that range or that space, right? So whether you said it's the neon buildings or the Colosseum and the neon buildings, or the background of the neon buildings, that is your focal point, right? You could say it's the neon buildings, you could say it's the Colosseum, you could say that it's the neon buildings and the Colosseum working in there, but we know that that is the focal point of the design overall, right? You could even say that, oh, they're in front of everything in terms of spacing, so that's another thing. Okay, so sentence 3 is basically saying, in this career collage, we notice that the focal point is the Colosseum and the neon buildings, or the neon buildings. followed by the Colosseum, whichever you feel is appropriate, okay? So that's the first thing, right? So we notice that first, okay? Then we go into sentence number 4, right? Where we talk about the contrast, right? You cannot have a focal point without creating something to have it stand out. So that's known as contrast. It's about the differences. People notice things because one thing is different than another. They stand out. They say it pops. What they're really saying is that this is different. This stands out because it's different from something else in the image, okay? And that's called contrast, right? I guess the Spanish root word of that could be like contra, like it's against it, it's different, it's fighting it. So, or contradiction, right? Like it's opposite to what is seen. So it's standing out because it's different, it's opposite towards something else in the graphic, right? So there's 3, you could even technically say 4 different types of contrast happening in this. If we go down the list, there are 3 types of contrast, really 4. One is contrast of sizes. So the most easiest way to make something stand out in design is just go really big, make it stand out, make it the largest image in that graphic, right? So the question is that, do we or do we not notice a contrast of size in this image? Do those buildings stand out because they're bigger? And you could answer yes or no, or you can give your own interpretation. But what would you say would be? Are those buildings that we said are the focal point, the Colosseum and the neon buildings, are those standing out because they're bigger? And you could type in yes, you could type in no, but what would you say it would be? Okay. Why would you think that, right? Okay, so everyone agrees. Yeah, it is so bigger. Okay, so that's one type of contrast we know for sure. The second question is, okay, well, if we can create contrast with sizes, can we create contrast with colors? And is there a contrast of colors happening with that focal point, with the building and the Colosseum? Okay, I think the obvious answer is yes, right? We have these neon colors happening in one building. We have sort of the brighter colors happening with the Colosseum. So yeah, I think we can safely say that there also is a contrast of colors. What are those colors, right? Well, we're going to say, well, neon color of the building versus sort of like the brick or yellow tone of the Colosseum, or the neon colors of the focal point versus the dark, bright daylight color or bluish color of the sky in the background. But at some point, these buildings are different colors to something else. So you always want to say what the something else is, right? So, oh yeah, the 2 buildings are larger in the image compared to the background or other buildings. Okay, the colors of the building are also contrasting due to the bright neon colors found in one of the structures, which differs from the sort of daylight, bright colors of the sky in the background, right? Right, the buildings are not only darker, but also more blue than the rest of the sky in the image. So you want to always say how they're different. Oh, they're different because one thing, this building is specifically these colors, and then it differs from this other thing, which are these other colors as well. Okay, so that's another component to it, right? And we can get really specific, right? So that's going to be like your sentence 4 roughly. But before I finish that off, let's continue with the other contrast of shapes, right? Are the shapes of the buildings different than the other shapes? You could arguably say those neon buildings in the center are a different shape than like the Colosseum, or it is a different shape than the mountain. And when I think of those shapes, we think of 2 types, right? Geometric versus organic. So if there's contrasting shapes, which are happening in the design, then we're going to say that, oh, well, yeah, the buildings are, the neon buildings are geometric, and they're contrasting the shape of the Colosseum, right? Or we could say that the geometric shapes of the building are contrasting the mountain in the background, which is organic, but there's a contrast, right? You can even get even more specific within that as well, and kind of break that down. Edges are more rough and geometric than almost everything in the image. So that could be specific on the detail of it, right? So contrasting, elements within that actual building can be mentioned as well. But we always want to make sure that as you're writing that sentence number 4, it could turn into even 4 and 5, because we see a lot of contrast happening here. We could say, as a general structure for contrast for sentence number 4, okay, well, we notice focal point due to the contrasting geometric shape of the buildings, or the neon building, versus the Colosseum, which happens to be organic. Period. We also notice contrasting colors, which are neon within the building, or within the high-rise structures, versus the classic structure of the Colosseum, right? So we can even mention that within sentence number 4 and 5. So you could expand into 2 sentences the contrast if you wanted to, because we notice a lot happening here. For this presentation, you can mention 1 or even 2 if you wish, that are most noticeable, okay? And then, just for analysis sake, contrast of spaces, you could say, that those buildings, the Colosseum and the neon buildings, are in the foreground, right? They're in front of versus the background. So it becomes a focal point due to spacing. So these things are in the foreground. Things that are closer to me, that are in the foreground, stand out more versus the background. And that we take that principle from photography also, where if an image is standing in front of a background, we think that's the subject, that's the first thing that we notice. So these are all, I would say contrast is so important, that, if not maybe the most important thing to always analyze in any graphic that you see anywhere, because that is the actual stuff to make it a focal point. So I said this in the beginning, in the first day of class, contrast is so important, because the only way to get anyone to look at anything, graphic, poster, printed, cell phone, mobile, website, you name it, VR, right? Animation or movie, augmented reality, virtual reality. At the end of the day, a contrast of size, shape, or color will always stand out. Okay, so that's the secret sauce to graphic design. How are you creating the differences? Are you making sizes, shapes, colors, or spacing, foreground, background? Okay, does that make sense overall? I think I got that across, but I want to make sure that everyone got to give me a little thumbs up emoji if that makes perfect sense. You could do that for photography as well, right? Right, and what is that thing that's standing out? You could tell someone to stand in front, get closer to the camera, because it'll look bigger in the image or the viewer. That's photography. That's focal point. That's contrast. You're designing by moving objects around in the image, telling people, or putting objects in the camera frame or in front of that when you take a photo of it. Photoshop kind of does the same thing, but we have more flexibility, more power, because we're moving bits and pieces from other photos and creating those images in and of itself. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so that's like sentence 3 and 4. Sentence number 5, we're going to move on to balance, right? And so balance, there's only 2 types of balances. There's symmetrical or asymmetrical balance in the world. So I always say, pretend that you're drawing like this sort of like red line. Let me go ahead and pull that up in my drawing viewer here. I always say, if you draw sort of like a red line over the canvas, and then you draw a line down the middle of the image, and you look at the left side and the right side, then there's a simple question to ask, right? Is the left different than the right? Okay, which the obvious answer you guys would say is, what would you say it is? Yes or no? And why is that? Okay, now let's get specific, right? If you have an answer, why would you say that? Well, we know it's different, yes, but how is it different, right? What would you say in your sentence saying, in this design, there is asymmetrical balance because, and how would you get even more specific with that? You can even type it in the chat. Okay, that's great, Jolene. Yeah, there's definitely more buildings on the right, more high-rise structures found in the right section of the canvas versus the image versus the left side. You could even say that we notice more, gosh, I think like a little bit more classical and even fantastic, planetary images on the left versus on the right. But can we be more specific as to how the left is different than the right? Okay, so by being specific and calling out what they are, that helps, right? And you could even say, the angle of the high-rise buildings on the right varies from the vertical, slightly angled, buildings or structures or objects on the left. So if they're really out there, I always like to mention images because sometimes it's hard to kind of like, there's planets and there's buildings, and you can narrow it down and say, well, the elements or images of or objects on the left vary from those on the right. Okay, so your sentence 5, possibly 6, is basically saying we have an asymmetrical balance. Okay. And because the left varies on the right, and you say specifically what that might be. Okay, sky rises are more centralized on the right side, and there's more going on the left. And when you say there's more going on the left, I would say like, oh, there's more elements or more images applied to the left side of the image versus the right, right? The more specific you can be in your write-ups, the better, because we want to get to a point where we can be somewhat conversational, but a little bit more specific there. Okay, so we'll break that down, take it up, guys, and then you can kind of go in that direction and flow that way. Okay, all right, so we got a couple more elements coming in too. Let me go ahead and break that down, and let me clear that up so I can give you some time. Okay, proportion and scale. Okay, we also mentioned there's going to be some proportion and scale happening in here. So what's bigger, what's smaller? I think we already talked about that. So you can even reiterate and say like, oh, okay, what we noticed in the image is proportion and scale. You can call out the same thing, or you can say something else is different, right? So if you see something else that's bigger and smaller, feel free to call it out, or you can mention the same thing again. But we want to mention it. So if you want to say that the Colosseum is bigger than the Eiffel Tower, you can, but that's like the obvious one, okay? Or the images, that would be super helpful. Okay. Okay. And then we have harmony and variety. So I just want to mention that really quick. Okay. Harmony is what's similar. So what is similar in the harmony of the image? Okay. When you think of harmony, I am always thinking about like the elements of art. So are there similar lines, similar shapes, similar tones of color, brightnesses or values, similar colors, the same treatment of spaces and size and textures? Go ahead and take a moment and type in what's similar here. What do you see the same of? Okay. All right. I'm going to take about a minute or two. Okay. I'm going to answer a quick question from our guest here in the room. So answer that. What do you see more of? What kind of elements do you see more of that are the same? Okay. Take a moment to type that in. I'll be right back, guys. Okay. Okay, hey guys, my apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of an extended conversation, but really quick, did we get a chance to start typing your principles of design there? If you were already working on it, typing it up, you give me a little thumbs up. If you are, great. Let's take a quick minute to kind of finalize and set that up. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, if that's okay. Let's take a quick break. I know we're going a little bit early today, but we'll do a quick 5-minute break. We'll come back and finish up harmony and variety. And then when we get back, we'll leave a little bit of time to finish the write-ups and the typing. And then we'll move on into reviewing the next exercise. We're gonna do that together, followed by reviewing your collages as well, okay? So if that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up emoji, that would be great. And then we'll move forward from there. Let's go ahead and do a 5-minute, regroup, and then we'll take it from there, okay? All right, we'll see everybody in about 5. Kind of go from there. Okay, all right guys, so like we were saying, there's 2 last principles that we're working on. And we were talking about harmony, right? So based on the comments that I saw here, common parts that I see, parts on both sides, different components, darker tones that are in the light. So I would agree with you, Jolene, when we talk about harmony, which is like what makes the design come together, it's all about what's similar, right? So similar lines, shapes, colors. So just looking at some of the elements here, common parts on both sides of the sizes of different components, darker tones, they're paying the lighter side. So the sizes are similar. So I would agree, right? The scaling of the buildings or the sizes of most of these structures are relatively the same. So you can say there's a harmony of sizes happening here. So the proportion or the scaling is virtually the same from mountain to high-rise building to Eiffel Tower to Big Ben. It's like it almost seems like there's a consistent sort of like size or scale happening here, which kind of makes it a little difficult for the focal point if it wasn't for the space, but we see that happening there. Mostly geometric lines, sky rises and the windows of the Colosseums with the Big Ben, Eiffel Tower, structure lines of the whole image. So we see mostly more, I would say more straight line. Yes, a little bit more geometric forms for the most part, right? Buildings are geometric. The Colosseum is somewhat of a geometric structure, you could say, or argue, a little bit of an organic line, but Big Ben and most of the high-rise structures are mostly geometric. So squares, straight lines, angled lines, shapes, that's another part that we could say for sure. And the Louvre is also there on the upper left. So, oh yeah, a component of the upper left is happening there, so that's contributing to more there. And then Myra says more organic lines and darker tones. And I would agree in terms of organic when it comes to the Colosseum, right? And also going into that mountain in the background. I would say there's some harmony happening in that area, but what's kind of cool about harmony is that it's not one or the other. It's kind of like more of, or is it like 80-90%? So it's more of a spectrum, and there's more of a range. So you can have like 80% of geometric, 75, 76, 77% of geometric forms and structures. You can have 10 or 20% of geometric shapes. What's cool about, what makes this design analysis interesting and what makes design really cool is that I see it not so much like this or that, or one or the other, or black and white, or 1 and 0. It's more kind of like a light, it's more like, 70% or 60%, or it's more of a spectrum, right? So it's almost like that. You're analyzing things properly when you see like 20% of organic form and like more 80% of geometric shapes and forms. You're analyzing when you say things like, it's predominantly this element or this versus that, right? You're doing it right when you kind of stop and say, you know what, it does look mostly symmetrical, but this little part is pushing it towards asymmetrical, or it's mostly asymmetrical, but there is a little bit of symmetry. It's when you think that or you say that to yourself, that's how you know you're starting to like analyze things properly, or you're starting to think and see things like a designer, because it's not one or the other. It's more like more ranges, if that makes sense. If that makes sense, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji, because that's how you know it's going to be like standing out a little bit more, right? I see more of this, I see less of that. Okay, so then for for harmony, we can say that it's mostly organic, or excuse me, mostly geometric or predominantly geometric form. You could even say that we see a predominantly darker shades and tones, even though we have some slight brighter colors like the sky, but it's predominantly darker colors. That's what's bringing harmony, making it look good visually, because it's mostly that, more of this, more of that. Okay, and then the last one is we were saying is variety, and variety is easy because variety is all about the differences, right? So you could say things like, well, you know, because there is predominantly geometric shapes, there is a slight or small variety of organic versus geometric shapes, or a small variety of organic shapes. And that's kind of how we can justify the two. It's like, I thought harmony was all, it's like, no, think of harmony and variety as more like brightnesses or levels or percentages, right? Oh, well, there's 80% harmony, these are what's happening, but there's a little bit of variety, and it's like 20% of variety, and it's more organic shape. So there is a variety, or some slight variety of organic forms happening in this image. There is a slight variety of brighter colors, or a highlight of brighter colors to give a little bit of variety to it. Okay, so when we think of harmony and percentages, we think of variety in the opposite way. Variety is kind of like, oh, what do we see a little bit more of or a little bit less of? And then how do we apply that into the image? Okay, so let's kind of break this down in terms of the warm-up. First sentence, okay, in this image of the collage, there are multiple principles of design. Second sentence, the principles of design that we see are contrast, focal point, balance, scale, harmony, and variety. Third sentence, we talk about focal point. The focal point is the Colosseum and the building in the center. Fourth sentence is that, oh, well, the contrast is created by sizes or contrasting sizes found in the images, or the sizes of the building. And there's contrasting colors, the darker tones versus lighter tones, right? So that could be 4, 5, or you could say 4, right? Sentence number 5, the balance in this image is asymmetrical because we have more high rises on the right side of the image, or more of this on the left versus that on the right. Sixth sentence is saying, well, we also notice proportions and scales happening here, found in like the Eiffel Tower versus the Colosseum, or found in one thing versus the other. Seventh sentence, we also notice that there's harmony, a harmony of geometric forms that are predominant or showing up as a majority in the image. We also notice predominant colors or darker tones happening in this that bring the image together and make it pleasing to see, or more unifying. Sentence number 8, variety is also available in this image. We can see varieties of organic form found in the mountain, or the Colosseum with its curved lines and curved outlining of the structure, followed by some organic colors found in the sky, or some brighter tone of blue in the sky versus the darker tone. In conclusion, sentence number 9, in conclusion, we know there are multiple principles of design happening in this image, which makes it a very good piece for the student. Boom, and you're done. So pretty lengthy, but that's the format that we want to type it in. Okay, go ahead and type that out for me, guys. Enter that in. I'll put in the complete and incompletes, or the completes. And then as soon as you're done, if you could just say in your chat that you are done, we're going to jump right into the grid variation exercise, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's done. And if we still have time, which I believe we do, okay, we'll still have a little bit of time to discuss some collages and review that. Okay. All right, take a few moments and I'll monitor and enter some points. If you're already done, go ahead and take a quick peek at today's exercise. If you want to review, read a couple of things, maybe take a little peek at the video, feel free. and then we'll do it together as a class, okay? All right. Okay. If anyone's still writing, can you please give me a thumbs up emoji if you're still typing? Okay, perfect. Okay, sounds good. Okay, and if you're done, guys, feel free to take a peek at the activity on Canvas. There is a little video attached. So if you want to just get a preview of how that's done, we'll go over it, those exact same steps for the 2021 version, of course, as soon as we're done with our write-ups, okay? Okay, guys, give about another 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. If you're still typing, continue to do so. I'll have a couple of quick announcements anyway that could always be followed up in the video too. And of course, we also have the recording. So if there's ever a situation where something is missed, you could always come back to the recording. So let's give you about 2 more minutes there, and then we'll kick off with some announcements, and then we will go into the exercise. All right, guys, so we're gonna move forward. And I'll start off with just a couple quick updates and announcements there, okay? So first of all, like I said, principles of design. I'm kind of moving into this level where I'm digging deep into the principles, because the more we see, the more we break down, the better we get at becoming designers, okay? So it's my hope that, and I'll come back over here. It's really my hope that when you leave the class, and really before you leave, actually, you start to see things within the lens of the principles of design, right? Being a graphic designer is, I say, in my opinion, a lifestyle. You're constantly looking at things and catching things, and just taking quick moments and here and there to kind of like appreciate things graphically. I think when you're younger, you definitely get more time to break things down, right? And that's great, and you should do that, because when you're young, you have more energy, you're more idealistic, you're more open to new ideas, right? And eventually, as you kind of get into the business and start getting your feet wet and doing projects, you start to learn about the culture, the money, the lifestyle, the do's and the don'ts, right? You meet people that are very talented, and you meet people that are very insecure. And the hope is that within all this, we find some type of community and support for one another. If you've ever taken my classes, we've had guest speakers at one point, and our guest speakers are studio owners, and they basically say that the best thing to do to prepare college students, especially as graphic designers, is to help them think critically. We had a guest speaker, and Francesca, I think, remembers that, Aaron Atchison, and then Kalena, you were here, of course, and Gio. We had Aaron Atchison come by, right? And he was great. He was amazing. And out of all the things he said, what's the most important thing to teach young designers? It was it was a very unlikely response. He says, teach them how to critically think and teach them how to express themselves and communicate. That because to be able to see the work and design and break it down in your head critically, like through the principles and elements, and be able to say, you know what, I see what you see, but I'm thinking maybe if we actually focus more on the contrast or this or that, we can actually get better at it, right? And those communication skills lead into other areas like, well, talking to clients and talking to your teammates and to talk with other designers. You know, you can be a freelance graphic designer and do things in your own bubble, but eventually you're going to have to talk to a client, charge them, have serious pricing conversations, and sometimes that requires, you know, getting talking about things, practicing communication in a way that is really, really comfortable and open. And you know, most designers have a little bit of a difficulty talking because they're so introverted because we're so into our work. But eventually we do need to kind of come out of our worlds a little bit and engage at others and persuade others why we think our work is great, right? And so, or why there's success in that work. There's even designers that don't want to do that, and that's totally cool. And they rather work for a studio, and they rather just offset that to somebody else. And I've seen designers do really well living like that, right? Where they don't want to do the negotiation and don't want to be in the spotlight. They just want to do good work. And that's okay too. You know, they do really good work, but they have boundaries, and they say yes or no, and they speak up when they know it's time to speak up, right? So if they know that there's something they don't want to do, then they basically have to talk about it, right? And they say, hey, can I have a meeting with you? I want to talk a little bit about some things that are on my mind. You go, have a nice simple conversation. Hey, I'm going through this situation, or I don't think I can do that project or this. So, I think we should pass it on to someone else. Not trying to be difficult, but I really think it'll be helpful if we move on. And that's okay. So knowing when to step into, I've seen designers that are just very introverted that just want to do it and just offset the work and just work for studios and do good work. That's great. But at some point in their careers, they also have to learn to speak up, talk, negotiate at one level or another. And so that's helpful too. So whether it's a lot, a little, or somewhere in between, be aware that at the end of the day, it's all about critical thinking and communication. And these exercises are a way to do that. So the saying part and me talking about it is helping you not only understand it and see the world, but also helping you communicate it and talk about it. And that's also helpful as well. And then the writing part is like you putting it in your thoughts, and it's like talking. So that's why we do what we do. So you can kind of see it, know how to think about it, hear me talk about it, so you know how to articulate it, and then be able to type it out so that you can now like turn it into your own words. And writing is just another way of talking, basically. So it helps me see how you're talking through the screen. Okay. Does that make sense? If it does, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. So that's kind of like the mad science behind it all. That's the education, that's the learning side of it all. And so that's why we do what we do. And that's why we put a little bit more time on the principles of design, right? They're very, very important. They're very, very important. So we want to make sure that you guys take away that critical thinking component and put it into your world. Okay. So, but we will get to the technical side, and that's also important too. But I do think that theory is just as important as the technical stuff. Okay. Okay. So, so two quick announcements I'll say after that I made a couple of improvements to the video portion of Canvas. So if you guys know, right, at the end of class or the beginning of the next class, or just before the beginning of the next morning, I always put the recordings on a YouTube link. I embed the YouTube video and I add a link to it. Well, YouTube, yesterday, and I'm going to start doing more of this, I started adding more chapters into the videos. So if you don't know, basically you can push play, but sometimes it's hard to, like, within a 2-hour recording, know where when I talk about something, right? So I started adding chapters to the YouTube videos. So basically, if you click onto the YouTube link or watch on YouTube link here at the bottom, it opens up a new window, which basically takes you to the video YouTube link, right? And when it opens, there's something called tagging, which you've seen in a lot of other videos, I'm sure. I don't think teachers do it often, but basically, I'm starting to incorporate more chapters and tagging of chapters into the video. So for example, at the bottom here where it says the description, and I'll annotate that really quick. There is, let me go ahead and pause that so that it doesn't set it up, but let me go ahead and put that in here. So like right here, we're in the red, there's like a blue tag and go over here. That's basically called a chapter or a chapter tag timer. And when you click onto that, it actually takes you to the title, how to create a genetic mutation activity. So if you click onto the hour, 52 minutes, 7-second mark, it'll basically jump to that section. So if I click onto it, then it's gonna take me to the genetic mutation chapter, and then we can see where we're talking. I'm always about trying to improve the learning experience online. And so this is just a great way to just get to skip all the noise or skip certain chapters or sections in the class and go directly to the exercise. And so I put that in there for you, and I'm starting to incorporate more chapter tags as we go forward, okay? So that's my slow intent. I'm trying to put a little bit more of that into effect. And so that's gonna be one thing that I'm trying to add is those chapter tags. That way you can just say, okay, like what part does he go over this? Okay, let me go to the chapter tag, click, and then you're there, okay? So I started to incorporate that more. So you'll see that within the actual YouTube link when you click onto the YouTube video here, which says watch on YouTube. You click onto that, it'll take you there, okay? The other thing too is that we are moving pretty quick in the class for exercises this week. So if at any point you feel like you're running behind, you can always catch up. You have technically till Friday to do certain assignments, right? And in extreme circumstances, you could always turn it in a little bit after that, but you don't want it to be like completely last minute either, okay? Because this week we are doing, as you can see, a lot of exercises, okay? So you wanna make sure that you're staying on top of it because we have our grid variation. Tomorrow we're doing the magazine cover project. We do almost every day there's something new. And next week it's gonna slow down a little bit as we focus on the magazine project, okay? So we just wanna make sure that you're keeping up. If you are keeping up, thanks for doing that. If you feel like you're a little behind, you got plenty of time after 12 o'clock to work on it. So it's highly recommended you put in at least an hour to 2 hours after the class to work, right? And put some things into effect. Slash Friday, you also have all day Friday, all morning, all afternoon, all evening to work on it as well. So you have plenty of time there too. So just, try to manage your time wisely. Don't overcommit to anything. Just because it's open doesn't mean that the work is not gonna take time. It will. So as you're starting to find out. So, this week we'll try to keep up with the pace. It'll slow down a little bit next week when we get deeper into the magazine cover project. It'll be fine, okay? So just a quick word about that. Then lastly, what I'll say is that as we start to build our files within our programs, it's gonna be really good to also think about ways to organize your files, right? So one of the things that we want to do, or I've seen this little graphic, which is really helpful, is just basically like a designer's way of organizing files. Everyone has different ways of organizing files. I would say most of the time, designers are kind of out of control when it comes to their file formats. And then when they start working, they're like super organized. But normally when they start to work, they become organized. I would say it's good to start being organized now in college. With your folders. And I think most professors at Rio talk about that, and they hold you accountable to that. And even when we get back into the classroom, I believe next semester, or not in the fall, but in the spring. So in 2022, basically, when we get back into the classroom, Professors will be even checking folders, making sure that everything's running its format, right? So here's a little graphic that is helpful. Basically, it kind of shows different ways to keep your file organized. Basically, it's a folder within a folder within a folder, and files labeled accordingly, right? So if you're doing a project, typically you have the name of your project, which is your work file. And when you're there, you have subfiles or subfolders related to like the client or the project. So we're normally here, and then we have a file like down there on average. But whenever we do like very big projects, normally you would have a work folder, then you have like the client folder within that, which is basically like, here's the company I'm working on, or the specific project. And then you'll have a folder, which is basically like the actual folder that holds all the elements, all the files, all the pictures of your project, right? So like in the exercise that we're doing with the genetic mutation, we have like 5 celebrity photos, and then we have the Photoshop file that you're sharing, right? So typically what happens is that you'll have like a folder, which is your assets. And that the assets is where your photos, your images all go into, right? Drawings, Illustrator, whatever, in there. And then you'll have a separate folder, which is the design folder. And in the design folder is where the Photoshop document or Adobe Illustrator document or the publishing file, the thing that's being designed, goes, right? And even when that's done, let's say you're sending it to print, sometimes companies that do prints need it in their own special way. So they'll even take your file and say, well, before we move forward, we're gonna need to make sure that you can also set up your file for our printing production. So please lay it out with something called bleeds and make sure it fits within this template. And there's a car going by, so I apologize for the noise, but let's give him a second to pass. Okay, and so you have those formats. So even when you get into like, whether you work at home or if you're gonna be working in the studio, most of the time you're gonna see something like this, where they're gonna have folders within folders within folders. And so it's really helpful to start thinking about that early on in your file. And it could be as simple as just, GDSN 178. Inside that folder, let's say you're gonna have, your Photoshop folder. And inside that, in Photoshop, there is a folder called genetic mutation. And then under genetic mutation, you have your assets folder and design folder, and then the pictures go in the assets, and then the design goes into genetic mutation. Photoshop document will go into the design folder, right? And that could be in that same format for your cloud document as well, okay? So it's just a great way to kind of help you stay organized. And however way extreme or however level, whether it's 2-folder level or 3-folder, or even just 1 folder, I would say is like pretty average. You do get better when you get to 2 to 3 levels of folder organization, okay? So I just wanted to show you that. It's a way to keep organized. So designers do really good at keeping their files organized. And how does this work for work in a work studio environment? Well, if the computer was to crash, or if one day, let's say your employer wanted to back up files on a desktop computer, and put it into another system or online or into the cloud, at some point you're going to need to organize your files anyway to send them out. So what greater way to do that than just to start and stay organized there? That way it's ready to go and move forward, okay? As we move into the cloud, it's really good to put things like that in the cloud, because your files can get really wild quickly, even in the cloud. And so it's the same on the cloud or even on your desktop computer, okay? If that makes sense, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. It's very, very helpful to do that. We even have professors, believe it or not, and some of you know who I'm talking about, that are notorious for deleting files on the school computers just to force students to stay organized. And if you know who I'm talking about, then you know who I'm talking about. So he's notorious for deleting everything on the desktop every 2 weeks, and he doesn't even announce it. He just says in the beginning of school, just to let you know, keep your files organized, put it onto a jump drive, put it into the cloud. If you don't, in 2 weeks, it's gone. And students learn the hard way. They go, where are my files? It's like, class rules. I delete every 2 weeks. You're gonna have to start over again. and it teaches them to stay organized. So don't get caught, is what I'm trying to say. Don't be that person. Try to move forward to stay organized. Okay. All right, guys. So those are some tips there and some quick announcements. Now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about grid variations. So we are now moving into the assignment for today, which is understanding and applying color correction and effects using image adjustments and gallery effects in Photoshop. Okay. This is a little bit of a lengthy presentation, so I'm going to go step by step. Chances are you will be coming back to the recording to do it. So we're going to kind of flow with it a little bit. And if you, I'll probably move a little bit quickly. So if you kind of want to try to follow along, you can, but it will move pretty quick in that process. Okay. Now, this is what it will look like typically. Okay. Your grid will look somewhat artistic when completed. And it could be tiled, right? Or it could be slightly spread out, but it will kind of have this look and feel similar to this, right? Where you're just applying different adjustments, different effects to it. So it'll have a little bit of like an artistic feel and flow, almost like a pattern in a way, tiled together. And the image adjustment panel looks something like this, okay? You'll see something called an adjustment. It's on the right-hand side of your screen typically, known as adjustments, okay? And an adjustment is basically an image adjustment, and it's there's multiple tools that are used to basically change color settings, brightnesses. It's a really great way to quickly make an adjustment to a photo or a layer in your Photoshop document in seconds, right? So I can turn an image into black and white, or turn a layer into black and white. I can change the brightness of one layer or another. I can change everything holistically. So it's a great way to make a change, but also you can come back and delete it, remove it, and make those changes. And so we will live within this little area in the red, which is those multiple tools, okay? So it's really awesome. It's a really great way to make those adjustments. It's kind of like like Instagram's filter in a way, but with way more control. It's more precise than just a filter, but it is like filters, but it's way more precise. I would say Instagram has like combinations of filters in one button, whereas in Photoshop, it would take like 3 or 7 different changes to get to that one gallery effect or that filter in like an Instagram or a TikTok, basically. So it's more piece by piece, step by step, so to speak. Okay, so we'll live here within this tool. Okay, obviously it's a different color in the current version of Photoshop. We will do different adjustments like black and white adjustments and whatnot. But when you create an adjustment, it does show up like a layer. So if you recall from yesterday, when we created or as we're building our collages, we normally see something that looks like this in the red box, where we have the image and a mask over it, right? The little tile on the left, this little square, is the original image. And then on the right, it's the mask. And we said that mask is like day and night, right? Black is to hide, white is to show. So if I'm masking something, chances are that it's going to be, white's going to mean that that's what's visible. Black means that's what's not showing, right? So that's just a masking, that's just a layer that's masked, right? Image adjustments is very different, right? And an image adjustment is really more like a layer, but the layer has more like an effect onto it, right? So if you look in that little blue box, it looks kind of like a layer, right? But in reality, it's really like the effect on the left. So if I just kind of use my orange shape, right? Over here in orange, that's the effect, right? Like a black and white effect being applied to the layer that's underneath it. And the rule is that whatever is like on top of a layer, the effect gets applied underneath it. I know it sounds kind of weird when I say that, but basically when you have an image adjustment layer, if it's on top, basically what's black and white will affect everything going down. Okay, that's visible. Okay, if that makes sense, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. But basically what it means is it's like whatever is like, it's like an umbrella, right? whatever is on top, if that image adjustment, which is black and white, is on top, it's kind of affecting everything underneath it. So image adjustments can be added, and it can make a change, and it can affect the whole thing if you move it up or down. And you'll see what I mean in just a couple of moments there, okay? So it affects like the whole thing. And you can even be real specific to an image adjustment. So you can actually like assign an image adjustment specifically to a layer. And the key difference in that is really found right here in this little tiny arrow. It's so, Photoshop and all these Adobe programs are like Ferraris. It's like the littlest thing makes a big difference, right? So there is a level of detailing that we always have to be aware of. But essentially what's going on is that if you have an image adjustment, right, and it's specific to a layer, then, or an effect, and it's specific to a layer, that little arrow in the red box will basically be pointing down to the layer. And that's kind of like your indication that that thing, that adjustment, that layer is impacting the entire layer underneath that, okay? So that's kind of what it means, right? Image adjustment on top, arrow pointing down to the layer, right? You can even almost see that like there's a little bit of a push, or it almost looks like the image adjustment kind of pushed forward a little bit. And let me see if I can annotate that with a straight line. Do you see how like it's almost like push forward versus over here that the layer's like a little bit there, right? Every time something is image adjusted, it pushes forward just a little bit to point down, almost as if to say like it's kind of tagged on top, right? So you'll always see certain image adjustments or certain effects push forward a little bit to indicate that it's being applied to the layer underneath it. So it's kind of like linking it, tagging it, attaching it, okay? And so those are just a couple of things you want to be aware of as we're dealing with image adjustments, okay? What it looks like, okay? You push a button to activate it. What the layer or image adjustment looks like in the layers panel, how it translates under layers, and then how to specifically link it to a layer itself, okay? And at the end of the day, we'll kind of look like something like this, roughly, maybe a little bit closer, spread apart depending. But at the end of it, we will get to this level where we have like these 16 different images with different image adjustments and effects being applied to it, okay? But we gotta make sure that we're applying it. So we're gonna do that right now, and I'm gonna walk you through that in addition to copying and scaling things in the system, okay? So let's go ahead and begin. Okay, just wanted to give you an overview of how that works. But the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna obviously launch my Photoshop app. So I'm gonna open the program for a second here, and I had a couple of designs here ready to go, but let me go ahead and close it. Okay, and okay, switch over to Photoshop now that it's open. We're gonna go over to Photoshop. Okay, and as we're switched over, we're gonna create a new document. In fact, I'm gonna actually go and make this a share all window or share desktop number 1. Okay, so you should see my entire desktop at this point. So we have that set there. Okay, so let's open that up and move that over here. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're basically going to create a new document, okay? So we're going to go to a new document over here, and we're gonna say create new, okay? Okay, as I create new, we're gonna make the similar format. So if I go to the print document or print over here at the top or repeat on the left, I'm basically going to make sure that I have a print, create new, print, and it's gonna be a letter document, right? And before I even click OK, I'm gonna type in the name of the document beforehand. Some people like to do it after they click it because they're used to doing file save as and changing the name. It's up to you how you want to format it, but I typically like to just do it before. So the preset detail for this, or the name of the file we're going to create, is basically going to be your first name and your last name, grid variation. Okay, very simple, nothing complicated. Your first name, last name, so that when you share your file with me, I know whose it is. Adobe Illustrator doesn't say, Adobe Photoshop doesn't really say like where the file comes from when you go to like your shared with you tab. So that first name, last name in your file just makes it easier for me to identify the work. Because if it comes in as untitled, it doesn't really tag, and it does, but it takes longer. So it's just a convenience on my side, okay? But it's gonna be first name, last name, grid variation. And then of course the width is 8.5 inches, the height will be 11 inches, and resolution about 300 pixels per inch, which is fine. And then we'll hit create, okay? So which is on the lower right there, okay? And we have our document, which is already open, and we're ready to create this grid variation, okay? Now, the next step is that we want a picture of someone, okay? Now, I took a picture of myself. Do you have to do one of yourself? No, you do not. You can use a celebrity, that's totally cool, okay? I think years ago, I would have my students take a picture of themselves and they hated it. And they're like, okay, can we use a celebrity? I was like, yes, you can use a celebrity. So we'll come back to our Brad Pitt friend, and I'm basically going to go to place embed, and we'll add Mr. Brad Pitt in here. I think I have him on my computer as an original image, so I'll go to my computer instead of my genetic mutation version of him. Yep, there he is. And we'll add him in here, and we'll place him there. Okay. Takes a couple of seconds there. Okay. Now, I'm going to set up this Brad Pitt image 16 times. So I want to make sure that he's there. Okay. How do I do that? Well, the way to do that, and of course, beforehand, I want to make sure too, it's a good headshot and I can see it, is I'm basically going to place that image like as you saw. But before I click return or the check mark to complete that placement, I'm just going to take a corner, or a node as it's called, and I'm just going to scale it down. Okay. And I'm going to scale them down probably a little bit, about 2 inches or so, because 2, 4, 6, 8 is there. So if you notice on the right-hand side of the image, there's like this little black box, and it says W 1.338 IN, and underneath that H 2.007 IN. That is the width and the height in inches. So if I look at my document, I have my rulers visible there. Basically, a piece of paper is 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches tall. Okay. I just want to account for the size of the image. So about 2 inches, if it's 2 inches tall, 2 times 4, because it's going to be 4 rows of 4, which is 16. That's going to be about 2 times 4 is about 8 inches. So I have plenty of room to add, to my document if he's about 2 inches, or if your photo is 2 inches. So the point I'm trying to make is that the height should be about 2 inches for your image. Okay. And any width of your choice, but mostly the height will be about 2 inches. Okay. Give or take, with higher or lower, that's okay. Okay. Now that I'm set, I'm going to hit return on my keyboard, enter on my keyboard, or I can hit the check mark, which is on the upper right-hand side. So here's some new stuff there. You can even hit the little check mark here to complete it. So check means complete, put it in there, set it up, get it done, place it. So I'm going to hit check, and it's been added, right? The little X, black line over the X, or the black X over Brad's image is gone. And that basically means that he's been placed there. Okay. The way I can tell he's been placed there is that on the lower right-hand side of my interface, I have my layers panel, and I already see that there is a Brad Pitt headshot here on the lower right. Okay. So that means that he's been successfully added as its own layer. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to reduce some of the panels. Okay. Just for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to reduce some of the panels so we can just see the layers panel in and of itself. Okay. And did I exit out of my screen? Yeah. Let me go back to desktop 1. And we'll come back there. Okay. So I'm going to reduce, I'm going to hold the layers panel. I'm going to pull it out. At least it should work. There it goes. And I'm going to tap the little collapse to icons on the upper right-hand side. There's like this little double arrow there. So I'm going to click onto that to close that and just make enough room for the layers panel because I want to see the layers panel there. And also my tools is on the left-hand side over here. I kind of like double panel or double column for my tools typically because it's quick to see and it's shorter distances, but it's up to you how you would like to do it. I kind of like to see it in 2 layers and things of that sort. Okay. And now that I'm here, I'm basically going to, I'm going to basically copy the Brad Pitt layer 3 more times. Okay. So I want to copy this layer so that I have 4 pictures going across. Okay. So how do I do that? Well, there's a couple ways you could do that. One way is that you can basically go to your layers panel, and I'll move this over here in the center. And if you go to layers panel, you'll notice that underneath that is a little button. Oh, okay. It won't show up because of my arrow key, but it's highlighted. And where is it? Click, hold, in there. And we're not going to create a new blank layer, but that little button on the lower right looks like a square with a plus sign. That's a create new layer button. Now we're not going to create a blank layer. Rather, to create a copy, there's more than one way to do this. So here's like 3 ways to do it. I can actually hold the click for the Brad Pitt headshot. And if I drag the little hand towards that little black, the square with the plus sign in the center there, right? And I let go of it, you can almost see like a little shadow of the layer following me. And then the fist is like hovering over the plus sign. It kind of turns dark a little bit. When I hover the fist over that little square and it gets dark, release, it actually made a copy. So I have 2 Brad Pitt layers here. Brad Pitt headshot, and then the word copy added onto it. And everyone says, well, where's the copy? Well, it's there. It's just right on top of it. Okay, so here's your first little lesson about Photoshop. If you copy a layer, it copies right on top of it. So the only way you'll know that something is a copy is by looking at your layers panel. Okay, if that makes sense, give me a thumbs up, because you're going to be relying more on your instruments, your panels, to basically figure out where everything is. You could technically, move things around to figure them out. I would say most of the time, you got to look at your layers panel and just turn off the eye, highlight a layer, and start moving things around just so you know it's there. Because that's kind of how the layer operates, okay? So before I do anything, I'm going to start to rename these layers, okay? So I'm basically going to take Brad Pitt headshot, and where the name is, right? I'm going to click onto the letters, any letter, click, and there's this sort of black box with blue highlight. And it basically, what you see here in the layers panel is that it's an entry field. So now I have an entry field for my layer. So what's this called? Well, I could call it Brad Pitt, but in this instance, I'm just going to call this row 1, image 1 for this particular file. So going from left to right, row to row, if I turn the eye on and off, the visibility eye, then that's basically row 1, image 1. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that the second one, which is above it, this is going to be row 1, image 2, return. So I double click the letters, highlights in blue. That means it's an entry field. I can delete it. Type row 1, image 2, hit return. That's how you change names of layers in Photoshop, okay? So I just showed you how to copy, okay? Just a quick recap. We placed an image, right? We sized the image or scaled it. We then copied the image or the layer, and then we renamed the layer anything we wanted in the layers panel, okay? So that is 4 things that we just kind of learned in less than 2 or 3 minutes, right? Now, there's more than one way to copy a layer, right? So these programs, these Adobe programs have like 3 or 4 ways of doing the same thing, okay? So what's another way of copying? Well, you can, if you have a mouse and you have a double clicking mouse, or you have right button capabilities, or a mouse with a right button on it, you could technically right click your mouse. So basically you can highlight a layer, right click the layer, and you can go to duplicate layer, right? So the second option here on this drop-down list is duplicate. If I click on the duplicate layer, I get a window that pops up and it says, hey, do you want to duplicate row 1 image 2? And it's going to be called row 1 image 2 copy. Well, yeah, I do want to duplicate it, but I don't want to have it called, well, I don't want it to be called that. I just want to make it row 1 image 3 instead, and click OK. And look what just happened here. It made it a copy of row 1 image 3. And remember, it copied on top of the second photo. So it's stacked over the second one, right? So now we're starting to see a little bit of the capabilities of the program, right? I have row 1 image 3, and it's there. I have to move it with my move tool, okay? So that's another way of making a duplicate. Maybe you like that better, okay? Is there another way? Oh yeah. Another way to copy your layer is that you could technically highlight the layer that's here, right? Row 1 image 3, which is obviously this one that's flashing. And I could technically go to layer, the layer menu on top, and I could do the same thing. I could say, oh, layer menu, duplicate layer. So I could do that as well. And I could duplicate the layer, and it'll do the same thing. I'll get a pop-up menu, and I'll say, type in the same thing, row 1 image 4, okay? That's kind of similar as the last one. Let me show you the quick key version. Okay, so that's like what, 4? Number 4, number 5, fourth way of doing a copy. If on your computer, what you could do is that you can, if you have a Mac, if you hover your move tool or mouse over your image, right? Let's say row 1 image 3. And if you have a Mac computer, you can, if you hover the mouse over the image, and then hold down the Alt Option key. Okay, so I'm kind of clicking, releasing. Do you guys kind of see this little white arrow underneath the black arrow? It's going from plus move tool to white arrow. Okay, that little white arrow, if I hold down the Alt Option key, okay, looks like that. That basically is the duplicate tool. So if I hold down Alt Option and I don't let go of that Alt Option button, I believe it's also Alt Option or window button for a PC. If it's different, please let me know. If I hold down the Alt Option key, hover my mouse over the row 1 image 3, and again, Alt Option, I'm not letting go, my finger's on Alt Option. If I hold the click on my mouse, and pull to the right, okay? Let go of the mouse, let go of Alt Option. I've made a copy of that layer. So I can Alt Option, hold the Alt Option, don't let go, click, hold the click, pull to the right. I can make a copy of a layer, okay? So that's 4 ways of how you can make a copy of a layer, okay? But I'm still gonna call this row 1, double click, not image 3 copy, row 1 image 4, okay? So we're gonna do that, okay? Now, if that makes sense, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji, okay? That's 4 different ways of making this, right? Again, if you're losing me, don't worry, we have the video, we can always go back to the video, all right? Now here's another thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a folder and I'm gonna put row 1 in that folder. A folder? Yeah, there's actually folders built into this program. So right over here on the lower right, there's like this little folder. So where the square plus button was to create a new layer, there's a button here, looks like a little mini folder icon. It's called Create New Group. Okay, it looks like a folder. If I click onto that, something pops up in my layer menu here, and it looks like group number 1. Okay, it has like a little down arrow key here and all that stuff. Well, that's like a grouping is like a folder. Okay, what I'm going to do with this is that I'm actually going to double click the word group 1, click. I have an entry field, which means I could type it in. Okay, it's white letters with a blue sort of box around it or in it. And I'm going to call this my row 1 folder. Okay, so row 1 folder. Okay, I'm going to hit return. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click the little arrow on the left. It's pointing down. I'm going to click it so that the arrow is pointing to the right. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight row 1 image 4. I'm going to hold the click anywhere in the layer, and I'm going to move the fist to the word row 1 folder. And you're going to notice that there's a little ghost image of the layer. And then right as soon as I go into the word row 1 folder, there's a light blue square over it. Okay, when you see the light blue square, not the line, but the square, release, and the row 1 image 3 or image 4 has disappeared. Okay, do it again. Row 1 image 3, hold the click, ghost image, drag it to the row 1 folder, box, light blue box around it, release, disappeared. Row 1 image 2, hold, folder, release, disappeared. Row 1 image 1, folder, light blue around it, disappear. Okay. Now I see the layers are on the left, but I don't see it on the right. Where did it go? It's inside the folder. Okay. So how do I know it's inside the folder? Well, if I click onto the little layer visibility button, which looks like the eyeball, click it off and on, the layer, all 4 images are in that folder. Okay. What if I want to see it? Well, if you want to see it, if you want to see the layers inside the folder, go back to the little right arrow or the little arrow pointing to the right, click it, and now the arrow is pointing down, and look what you got. You have your row 1 image, okay, 2, 3, and 4 inside that folder. And not only that, if you look at the little thumbnail on the left here, it's shifted forward just a little bit. Do you see that little gap underneath the arrow, right? If you look at the background layer, it's actually like forward, but all the row 1 image 1s are actually like right underneath the folder here. There's a little gap almost. That basically means that they're inside that folder. So Photoshop, in a super subtle way, is saying to you, hey, these images, they're in that folder, and we move the image a little bit forward underneath the folder as an indication, or the folder icon, to indicate that it's inside. If that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up emoji, because that's how you know that, like, oh, that's how I know it's in a folder. It's like, yeah, it moves it forward just a little bit, but you can literally just turn the folder eye off and on, and that's how you know it's in a folder. Okay. So that's kind of how that works. So this program is now getting a lot more sensitive in the way it moves about it. Okay. So we're gonna make now copies of this folder. Okay. I want 16 images of Brad, right? So I'm gonna make a copy of the folder. Okay, how do I do that? Well, we could do it in 4 ways. You can right click the folder and say duplicate the group. You can hold the click, drag it back into the little white square plus sign and make a copy. And it makes it into a row 1 folder copy, right? We can basically go in that direction to make those copies if we wish. There's no select or no filter of that for that particular folder. So Can't do it in the menu option, so to speak. Oh, but we can actually go, excuse me, to the layer menu and say duplicate group up here. Or I can hold down the Alt Option key, click, hold, pull down, and I got row 2. Just like that, I made a copy of 4 images, okay? So we have to rename them though, right? So let's go ahead and rename them. I'm gonna go to the row 1 folder copy, double click, and I'm basically gonna call this row 2 folder, okay? Enter. I'm gonna open the row 2 folder, and I'm also gonna change the names of those images, right? So row 1 image 1 is not really row 1 anymore. I'm gonna double click row 1 image 1 and delete the number 1 after the word row and enter row 2. Hit return. I'm gonna double click row 1 image 2. I'm gonna highlight row 1, delete the row number 1 after the letter row or the word row, enter row 2 or the number 2. Return. Row 1 image 3. I'm going to enter row 2, return image 3, double click. I'm going to enter row 2, image 4, return. Okay, I'm going to click the eye off and on. I'm going to do that for the folder. It looks correct. Row 2 image 4 is flashing. When I turn it off and on with the eye there, that's how I can kind of triple check. Row 2 image 3 is here. Row 2 image 2. Row 2 image 1. Okay, so I have that there. Close the folder. That's established. So now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a row 3 and a row 4. Okay, so we'll try with the right click. I'm going to right click, duplicate group. It's going to say, hey, this is row 2 folder copy. I'm not exactly say no. This is actually row 3 folder. Okay, click OK. Row 3 folder's there, but hey, remember, it's always on top of the last row. So I'm going to click with my move tool, hold the click, bring it down. Okay, open up row 3 folder, the little arrow on the left there. And again, row 3 folder, but it says row 2 images inside that folder. We're going to rename it. So row 2, change that from 2 to 3. I'm going to go to the next layer, row 2 image 2. I'm going to click onto the 2 after row, change it to 3 because it's row 3. I'm going to hit that eye off and on, confirm it. I'm going to go double click onto row 2 to switch the number to row 3, return. Click the little eye and make sure it's set. I'm going to go to row 3 image 4, row 3, return, flash on and off. And I'm just going to double check. Row 3 folder. Okay, yep, off and on with the eye. Row 3 image 1, yep. Row 3 image 2, yes. Row 3 image 3, yes. Row 3 image 4, yes. Close that folder out or keep it open if you're comfortable. We're going to do it last time here. We're going to take row 3 folder, okay? And we're going to make a copy. So I can right click it, duplicate the group. We're going to call this row 4. Okay, you can even hold down your Alt Option key or go to layer menu, make a copy. There's literally like 4 different ways to do it. We're going to call this the row 4 folder. Click onto OK. I'm going to move it with my move tool, move it down. All right. Open up the row 4 folder, eye off and on. Yeah, that's row 4. Hit the little arrow key to the left of the folder. Looks like a little tilde or a V. And again, row 4 folder, row 3 image 1. No, I want to change it to the other name. So this is row 4 image 1. I'm going to switch that 3, row 3, and change it to row 4 because it's in the row 4 folder. Row 3, image 2 is really now row 4, image 2. Double click the next one. This is row 4, image number 3. Turn the eye off and on, of course, just to verify if I ever get confused. Row 4, image 4, turn the eye off and on, just to make sure so I don't get confused. Okay, close the folder. So now we have row 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, which is really great. So if that's good, if that's making sense, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. Just want to make sure that we've got a little bit of an understanding of how to make these folders, right? Pretty straightforward, but it is so helpful to stay organized, right? The more organized you are in your programs, your original folders, even in the layers panel, other designers, when you're sharing assets or sharing files, are going to love you, because then everything's labeled and it's a way of saying, I support you as a designer by doing these things, right? So it's just a way to build collaboration. Okay, now, how do I apply the filter effects? Now that we know how to do all those adjustments, right? Like, okay, all right, so, how do I do image effects, Mr. A? Okay, well, now what we're gonna do is we're basically going to go to row 1, open up that folder, and we're basically gonna click onto row 1, image 1, okay? The first 2 rows are basically gonna be adjustments, okay? Now, where is the adjustments panel? Now, if I just go back to my original settings in Photoshop. So if I just reset my essentials back, and if this is what you see on your screen, you're basically going to find your adjustments panel right here towards the center of the screen. So you'll see your properties panel on the left that's highlighted, but if you take your mouse and click onto the word adjustments, kind of highlights light gray, click, that is your adjustments panel, okay? So you have your adjustments panel right there, right? If you don't see it, let me know, okay? So does anyone not see their adjustments panel, first of all? If you don't see it, maybe let me know, or thumbs up emoji if you cannot see it, but if on there, but it looks like everyone does, which is great. Okay, now for the purposes of this project, I'm gonna pull out adjustments. So you can leave adjustments here in the layers underneath it. For this presentation, I'm just gonna pull my adjustments out so you can see it side by side, okay? And I'm also gonna click, hold, and pull my layers panel out so you can see that too, okay? And I'm gonna close it here so that's visible, and then I'm gonna turn this into a 2-panel toolbar to set that up, okay? So I'm gonna have that side by side. Delete the arrow so it doesn't confuse anyone. Okay, so now here what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just scroll down to row 1, image 1. And I'm actually gonna pull my panel out a little bit bigger so you can see everything a little bit clearly. So row 1, image 1 layer is highlighted, okay? So it's highlighted there. I have my image adjustment panel. Basically what we're gonna do here is that for each image, you're going to select 4 different adjustments, okay? Now the image adjustment panel, if I look at it on top, there's different buttons. And when I hover my mouse over each button, it says the little name underneath the word adjustment. So this button that looks like a sun is called brightness contrast. The next one is called levels, curves, create new curves, exposure, vibrance, hue saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer, color lookup, invert, posterize, threshold, selective color, and gradient map, okay? So what we're gonna do here is that we're just gonna click onto the brightness contrast one, which is the sun, and we're gonna click onto that, okay? And as we click onto that, we see a properties window open up. What's properties? Move that over here. Basically, properties is, think of that as like the little controller for that adjustment. So it's probably better if I put this over here, adjustments on top, so you can kind of see that a little bit. And I'll move this down there so you can kind of see it. So basically what we have here is adjustment and then properties. Think of properties as controls for that adjustment. So it's how much brightness you want. So property is basically a fancy way of saying, oh, this is the controller for that adjustment, okay? And the way I know that it's for that tool is that in the properties window, oh, let me see if I can point to it. I know it disappeared for a second. Okay, right there. So you see like right underneath it, it basically says, under word properties, it says brightness contrast underneath it right there. That's how you know that that's a property or that's a controller for that. So it'll show you brightness contrast on top, the controllers underneath it. That's how you know it's for that adjustment, okay? So let's go ahead and adjust it, okay? Now, if you notice, the brightness is impacting the entire row of that particular, that adjustment is impacting that entire row. Well, let's look at it from the layers point of view, okay? If I look at it from my layers point of view, basically what's going on, and I'm gonna cover this so you can kind of see that, and I'll move it underneath here so you can kind of see that. There it goes. Basically, you'll notice that there is a brightness contrast adjustment layer over the word row 1, image 1. Okay, do you kind of see that there? So brightness contrast is over row 1, 2, 3, and 4. That it's affecting the whole row. Remember how I said think of adjustments like an umbrella? Whatever is underneath the umbrella is going to impact it and keep it affecting everything underneath it, okay? So if brightness contrast is there, that means it's affecting the whole row. But I just want to apply it to row 1, image 1 specifically, okay? What you're going to do is basically link the layer by clicking onto this little button below. So under properties, you'll see a button on the bottom of the properties panel. It kind of looks like a square with a little arrow pointing down, okay? If you click onto that, you'll see the arrow pop up. Remember the little arrow we talked about in the presentation? I'm gonna flash it off and on, and you'll see a little arrow underneath it, okay? I have successfully linked that layer, okay? So, hey Neil. So that's what's kind of cool about that, right? So it is successfully linked over. So what I'm gonna do in this situation is say, have it linked successfully. Now, if you got that arrow pointing down, go ahead and give me a little thumbs up emoji. I just wanna make sure that that was successfully linked for those of us that did it. Okay, cool. So can you turn it off and on? Absolutely, you can. That's what's so nice about it, okay? So this is brightness contrast pointing down to row 1, image number 1. Cool. All right, that's perfect. So now if I make an adjustment, I can increase the contrast, drop the brightness, make it darker, make it lighter. But now I know that it's affecting that specific layer. That's why Photoshop is so powerful. At the end of the day, this stuff can affect specific layers, and you can make adjustments. You can add layers and you can adjust those specific layers and come back to them and change them later after you save your file. It gets really, and you can organize layers and layers and groups and folders. It starts to get really, really powerful when you start looking at all the things it can do from all these little miniature setups, right? All these properties, adjustments, and whatnot. So what you're gonna do here is that you're gonna go to row 1, image 2. You're gonna select another adjustment. Maybe you wanna do levels. Click onto the link layer or adjustment layer link. You're gonna clip it to row 2, image 2. And basically what you're gonna do is that you're gonna make some adjustments to those layers. Okay, so if you notice, the Brad Pitt row image 2 on row number 1, he's getting brighter, he's getting darker. Basically what I want you guys to be doing for row 1 and 2 is apply a different image adjustment for row 1 and 2, but linking it and just giving it a test drive. Okay, be careful not to affect the whole thing. Okay, because because you have to link it, right? But there's things you could do like change the mid-tone colors or the shadows This is a popular one because if I want the photo to look like a certain color, like more, if I want Brad to have more blue, then I can make him more blue and add more blues to the image. So that's kind of like an Instagram effect, right? Now we're starting to see where all this stuff comes from. Instagram really stole their idea from Photoshop. What the Instagram team did was they basically say, hey, what if we could take all the Photoshop filters and do the filter and take all these adjustments and properties and layers, and let's just make it into one button to look like a certain photo. And the team said, yeah, don't people just want their photos to look like other photos that are printed? And don't those photos look like, have more of this, or more brighter colors or more darker colors, or look vintage? That's really what they want, don't they? It's like, yeah. And so they basically took like all the steps from layers, properties, and adjustments and turned it into Sierra filter, or they turned it into, I don't know, what is it? Italy filter. I mean, name a filter, right? Those filters are basically just them programming the computer to do all the steps from adjustments, properties, and layers and turn it into one, right? So anyone that was a graphic designer, they said, oh, hey man, that's like adjustment property, color balance, layer added into that. And they turned it into a free filter. Well, that's so convenient, right? And that's how they became a multi-billion-dollar company in the end. They just made Photoshop, or the filters in Photoshop, super convenient for the cell phone. Does that make sense? If it does, you can email a thumbs up emoji. So all they did was basically take the stuff we designers already know and made it easier for them. Sometimes designers just want to, people don't want to design. They just want the end result. But as designers, we have to kind of know specifically how to get there by knowing, well, that's color, or that's an image, or that's a property, or that's a balance, or that's a hue saturation, or that's a level adjustment. Like, we get more into the details, okay? So it's helpful to know the history of this stuff. Okay, so you're gonna do image adjustments for, and play with it. You pick your image adjustments that you wanna do for rows 1 and 2, okay? So you get to do that, have fun with it, link it, que Dios lo bendiga, right? As we say in Puerto Rico. We're gonna do that for row 1 and row 2 folders, okay? In fact, if you wanna name row 1 folder and put a little dash and say adjustments, that's cool, you can do that. I'll just do that for the sake of this presentation so that anyone who is watching the rebroadcast can rename it. Oops, I don't wanna do that yet. Adjustments. So that's gonna be adjustments, okay? Okay, let's talk about row 3 and row 4, okay? And before I do, if adjustments makes complete sense, if you can give me a thumbs up, that would be great. So, okay, professor, got it. Image adjustments, set, good, ready to go. I'll play with it on my free time. Great, awesome. What's up with the next one, which is the row 3, row 4 folder? Okay, well, I'll show you that right now. Okay, I'm gonna close properties and adjustments here on the right. Move my layer over. I'm actually gonna hit the little eye on row 1 folder and row 2 folder so I can just make it super easy for you guys to see the row 3 and row 4 folder. Okay, so in this instance, what we're gonna do with row 3 folder is that we're basically going to add some effects to it, okay? So we're gonna add some effects onto this. Okay, well, how do I do that? Okay, well, there's a couple ways you can do that. We're gonna go to row 3, image 1, and highlight that. And basically, there is a filter folder here, okay? And this filter menu. And in this filter menu, there's something called a filter gallery, okay? And this is kind of where you get a little bit of those Instagram filters, or you get a little bit of those special effects filters in other apps, right? What we're gonna do here is that we're going to go to the filter gallery, and we're gonna click onto that, okay? Click. Now, when I go to filter gallery, immediately a window pops up, which is sort of like the filter menu for that one layer, okay? So I'm still on that layer, right? It's highlighted, but now Photoshop is saying, oh, hey, I see you want to put an effect. On the left is your preview of the effect. In the center column is the different types of effects available to you. And on the right, it's the intensity or how much of the effect you want. So I'm just gonna close these folders for a second. So I have Brad here, okay? And basically I can hit Alt Option, zoom in and zoom out. I could do a Command plus or minus to zoom in and zoom out on my friend Brad here, just to kind of get a clear picture of him. So let's zoom in and see what he looks like. And let's just say I want to try artistic. I'm an artist. I want to see what I can do artistically. Well, I can make Brad look like a colored pencil just by opening the folder. So what I did here is that I basically clicked onto artistic, and I saw a color pencil filter in the center upper right section here. And I clicked onto it. Hey, it looks like someone drew him in a color pencil. Yeah, that's the effect, right? And on the right column, I can actually increase the width. So I actually can make the width of the pencil look a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. I can increase the stroke pressure. So I can actually add more pressure to it. So I can increase the effect of him. Like, goodness gracious, I could even change the brightness of it. So I can make him look like he's on a light sheet or dark sheet of paper. But at the end of the day, I'm basically applying this effect to him so that I can see what he looks like. And I can even change the pencil to a crosshatch or Conte crayon. So I can actually use crayon and switch them out a little bit if I want to, right? I can switch them to accented edges. Now I'm going into these other areas, but essentially for color pencil, we'll stick to the pencil, right? But I'm gonna set them up for color pencil. I kind of like that effect. That looks kind of cool and interesting to me. So I'm gonna click OK to that. And now what happens is that the effect has been added to row 3 image 1 to Brad, but now instead of an image adjustment being on top, the gallery effect is underneath it, okay? So it's called a smart filter, okay? So right underneath the word row 3, I see the word or another little row of filters called smart filter, and I see filter gallery. This is called a non-destructive adjustment, or it's an effect that I can come back to and change at any point. If I click onto the little eye on and off, I can turn the smart filter or the effect off and on Brad. If I want to change it, I just go back to smart filter. I can double click onto the word filter gallery, click, and it opens up the gallery, and I can change it to something else if I want to, and click OK again. Okay, so that's really great. And there's a little arrow on the right here, and I can close it, open it, but we'll keep it open for the sake of this exercise so you can kind of get a visual for it. But now I can change an effect, right? So let's do it again. We're gonna go to row 3, image 2. We're gonna go to filter menu, and then go down to filter gallery. Okay, kind of remembers the last one, so I can do the first option, or I can go to the third option. I can add that. Cool. I'm gonna go to filter gallery, click on a filter gallery, and I'm going to go to the next one, right? So I can do cutout or dry brush. Let me zoom in on him a little bit. Okay, let's really zoom in. And you can see how close you can get to the image and how much of an impact you can make just by making him look there. I can make him look like a film grain. So I can make him look like he's like in a film, in a vintage movie, and add a little bit of like what they call like a dirt or intensity there, right? I can put neon colors around him and change those neon colors to anything else like yellow, and click OK, and it changes it to yellow, right? I can increase and decrease the intensity of that brightness. I can make him look like he's been painted on or brush dabbed, right? And I can change the level of sharpness of that. Watercolor, right? I can make him look like he's a watercolor, and we can play with the shadows and the details and add texture to those watercolors if we want to. And so depending on where we want to do that, sponge painting, like there's so much you can pick here, right? That you can go with. And I'll click OK to that, and he's been applied to that as well. I can go to row 3, image 3, and do the same thing, filter gallery again, okay? And we can do additional ones And let's just take a look at some of the other ones, okay? Distort. Brush strokes is painting. So when you're painting, you do strokes on a brush, you have that. We can do distort, which is really like making it look like a diffuse glow. So like imagine like a magazine, and and you're doing a magazine and you want to, maybe Brad Pitt passed away, and and you want to show him like in this sort of like angelic glow. You can use diffuse glow. Or if you want to do a cover and you want to say like, oh, like the distorted impression of Brad Pitt, you can use like a glass filter or an ocean ripple, and you can kind of communicate through your photo like, he's jacked up, or he has problems, or the hidden life of Brad Pitt, but you're using filters not for fun. Filters are used for symbolism, for metaphor, for representation. You're trying to say something through the filter as a symbol. Okay, if that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up emoji. Okay, and that's the idea behind that. Okay, so if you want to do photography, which I know some of you do, you can really do some interesting things with your photography by adding certain subtle filters, because it'll add a quality that maybe most photos don't have, and that's the beauty of Photoshop. Okay, sketch. What Sketch does is literally that. You can change it to different sketches, so you can actually make photos look like they've been drawn on black and white paper. You can do halftones. You can do graphic pen, which looks kind of cool. You can do a rubber stamp, water paper, ripped or torn edges, plaster, and again, chrome. Like, what would it look like if I chromed out Brad Pitt or something? I don't know. But you can do a lot of interesting things with it. And that's the sketch version. We can make Brad look like he's neon, right? So that would be an interesting impact, right? And I could change the width of the neon colors and the brightnesses, and that, he almost looks kind of like Christ-like in a way, right? And so you can even like impact that and make adjustments. Like that's kind of a cool image, And so effects is great because you can take your photos to a whole nother level. And apply it in really interesting ways. Textures is very obvious. You can apply a texture to your image. So maybe he looks like he's on like a cracked piece of paper, or grain, which is grain can also be used for film or vintage photos, or mosaic tile. Maybe you want to show something that looks like he's been put on a tile of a wall, in the chapel, or he's a different patchwork, or make it look like he's been somewhat, pixelated, if that's the case, and computerized, or maybe it's stained glass. I thought that was cool when I discovered that. Like, oh my gosh, we can actually make images that look like stained glasses of church walls and stuff like that. And you can play with the intensities, and that's kind of cool, and you can play with that and abstract it out even more depending on the colors and the sourcing, right? So playing with the cell size, or texturizers as well, where you're showing him on canvas or sandstone or burlap or even brick, right? Like, what would this person look like if it was painted on brick, right? And how rough is the brick? And is it on the top right brick, or is it a bottom right kind of brick where there's lighting? And do we invert it? Can we invert it to something else? So it's really interesting, all the cool things you can do with the effects. And effects is used mainly to create like symbolism, if anything else. Okay. So feel free to use those effects, but basically this exercise is all about applying effects for rows 3 and 4. Okay. Last thing I'll say is, so I can open up for questions, is that I know we have the new filter, which is neural filters, and I really don't want to diminish neural filters because I think that's important. So even though I mentioned effects in the exercise, if you feel like you want to use neuro filters for row 4, which is the new filters that are in 2021, feel free. I think it's important to explore that a little bit. It took a little bit longer for me, but if you want row 4 to be neuro filter, give it a shot. I think it's going to be helpful because neural filters are new, and I don't want to be that teacher that didn't show you that new stuff from the program, because I think it's going to grow into the effects gallery and turn into this big thing, because now Photoshop or the Adobe products are getting smarter. So it would be great to kind of get to that point where we can use some of the neuro filters for things like we were saying, like smart portraits, which is beta, and changing the gaze of an image and making it look like it's turning in one direction or the other. It takes a little while longer, maybe because it is connecting to the internet and processing. It's not built to the program. So effects is built into Photoshop, which is why it processes so much faster. But if you notice on the upper right-hand side of my screen, there's like a circle spinning. That's because the Photoshop program is basically using it's called an algorithm or a smart program through the internet and connecting to the internet to adjust the image. If that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up emoji. Basically what it's doing is that it's sending the processing information of the photo to the internet, to the Adobe artificial intelligence system, and then it's analyzing that and it's shooting it back over to us, right? And it's processing that a little bit longer. And if you notice, it just processed, and there's, did you see Brad's eyes is now looking to the right? That's freaking awesome, right? Like if you've ever done this program before, that is insane that it just changed the eye gaze. You know how hard it is to do that in Photoshop? You guys are slowly starting to learn that right now, right? Like to do that would take hours, and it did it in seconds. And that just blows my mind, right? So we can change him, make him look in different images, but we can change his gaze. We can make him look angry. We can make him look surprised. I say, let's make that row 4, experiment with those gazes and change the gazes and the blurs and the depths, and see if it's outputting faster for you as a result. Okay. Mine took about a minute or so. So I'm really curious to see how angry he looks. That's amazing. So you see how he's like all ticked off here? And I can click onto the little photo booth at the bottom. I could do a before and after. But you know how long it would take for something like this to happen, guys? In regular Photoshop? Like for those of us that done genetic mutation, you know that it took a while just to do it, and to even make it look like it's scaled and balanced takes a while. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so feel free, switch it up, make them look mad, make them look this, make them look that, play with it a little bit. If you want to colorize them, give it a go. But I think it's pretty amazing how it's all playing out. And I feel bad for all the celebrities that kind of do that. And again, give it a go and see how it goes. I think this is going to be really crazy, and I think students are going to go nuts with this when they find out that, like, oh, I could take a picture of like my mom or my dad, and I could totally like make them look surprised and do all this crazy stuff with it. I don't know. I'm not trying to set them up, but there's a lot of fun things that you can do with this. Okay. So feel free to use neuro filters, or the neuro filters for row 4. That is insane. Okay, that is funny to me. So that's basically a surprised, angry Brad Pitt. Anyways, so I'm having a little bit too much fun. I'm already going off on a tangent here. So that's smart filters. Feel free to apply it. Okay. Once that's set, you can obviously, click OK to that. It'll ask you to submit your data and things of that sort. When it does, you can output that as a smart filter. And if it allows you the option to click OK, you can. I'll go ahead and I'll cancel that, and we can kind of take it back there. Okay. So that's our exercise. Okay. That's what we're going to be doing for today's assignment. So we have, all week to work on it. And again, the recording is available to you to kind of set it up, but we're going to use row 1, row 2 for adjustments, row 3 for effects, row 4 for neuro filters. And we're going to try to create this sort of artistic looking panel of images applied onto it. So something similar to this or more like this in your format. Okay. So that's going to be our exercise, and that should give us plenty of time to work on it. Okay. If that makes sense to you guys, give me a little thumbs up emoji, and we'll make this do. Oh, before I forget, of course, let's also make sure to share your file. So I always want to make sure I get to see this stuff. So going back to the image really quick, please make sure you're clicking onto this button over here to share your link with me so I can see your progress. Okay, this is for accountability, making sure. And also, if there's an issue, question, concern, it's going to be really easy for me to just click onto your file, download it, and open it into my program. Okay, so we'll probably have to go back to Cloud Documents, create a new folder. We'll call this the Grid Variation folder. Okay, and then we'll call that, again, first name, last name, Grid Variation, and we'll save that. Okay. And then once it's saved, then it's going to say, who would you like to send it to? And of course, you're going to share it with me again. Same email address, of course, which will be m_almina@mhs.hs.org. Okay, if you want to send a little message, put a message in there indicating what it is, feel free. Questions, issues, concerns, you could throw it in there, obviously, and I'll be able to see it. And you do an invite to edit. Okay, so you always want to make sure you're sharing with me. Again, the reason why we're doing the sharing part, guys, is that when we get to the magazine, you will have an opportunity to partner up with somebody to kind of like design your own sort of magazine cover, but you'll be sharing files with each other when we get to that group project. And then the only way you'll be able to see each other's work is through cloud computing. So this is 21st century design. We want to make sure that you have collaboration skills, digital collaboration skills. This is the way to do it. Okay, so just throwing that out there to prepare you guys for a digital collaborative future as designers. Wonderful. Okay, so question, giant triangle appears sometimes when we save our work. Good question. I saw the triangle as well. I think that could be a memory issue, Talia. So the Photoshop 2021 typically needs 20 gigabytes of RAM or memory available. So you might want to do an inventory of your memory and make sure that you have 20 gigabytes available at minimum or more. And that could be it. It could be an indication that there's low memory, and it could be a slow processing speed happening there. And one way to clear out, because that happened to me last week, and basically I deleted any movies. Like sometimes movies I download that I purchase are like gigabytes big, so I deleted them because I could always download them later. Or if you have a Mac and you back up your phone to your computer, you're saving all the data onto your computer. If you have like a recent version and older versions that are backed up, you really need the most recent one, not the older one, right? So delete the older versions of your iPhone or mobile phone backups, and that'll open up gigabytes of data. So that's what I did. I deleted my last update or backup of my iPhone, and it opened up 40 gigs because my photos and everything took that much. So that could be another strategy to open up space on your computer. Other ways, delete your downloads folder. Just try to clear up as much space as possible in order for it to open up. And if all is said and done, then and it's 20 gigs and it's running slow, it might be a processing thing, and you might need to maybe upgrade computers for the future. Okay, so that's yeah. So hard drive, external hard drive, or putting in a new hard drive with a higher RAM or higher memory could be possible too. Okay, and then you're all set there. The email is, let me go ahead and type it in one more time. It's right here below. It's m_almina@mhs-hs.org. And I will actually put it in the chat too. So then that way you can have that as a copy as well. Okay. I'm using the school email, my school version, because my Rio account, like some of you guys are having some issues. Until we rectify those, I'm using my school free account instead. So it's coming to the same person basically, just different accounts. Okay. All right. Okay, guys. So we will review our collages tomorrow. So I got a couple of them shared with me. So, feel free to continue working on your collages, share your file, of course, and we'll continue from there. And then And if you have some time today, work on those grid variations. I'll load up the video in about 15 minutes once I stop the recording. And you can always go back to the video. I'll chapter tag it so that you have access to it. So that's available to you as well, okay? Tomorrow we'll be kicking off the magazine project. So all these tools, all these exercises this week are really helping you to prepare for the magazine stuff. So definitely do the collages, do the grid variations, experiment, have some fun with it. So because I'm secretly preparing you for the magazine cover, and I kind of mentioned a couple of little tips like filters to change effects and things like that for images. Okay, so that's where we're heading, and it's going to be awesome when we get there. All right, okay, guys, it's 11:56. We're at noon. That's timed. You guys are officially dismissed for today. We will see you tomorrow bright and early, and have a great afternoon. Email me if there's any questions, issues, or concerns. Okay, we will see you then. Thanks.